Assalamu alaikum. Today I will be reciting verses 25 to 29 from Surah number 22 of the Holy Quran, Surah Al-Hajj. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذ بوأنا لإبراهيم مكان البيت ألا تشرك بي شيئا وطهر بيتي للطائفين والقائمين والركع السجود وأذن في الناس بالحج يأتوك رجالا وعلى كل ضامر يأتين من كل فج عميق ليشهدوا منافع لهم ويذكروا اسم الله في أيام معلومات على ما رزقهم من بهيمة الأنعام فكلوا منها وأطعموا البائس الفقير ثم ليقضوا تفثهم وليوفوا نذورهم وليطوفوا بالبيت العتيق صدق الله العلي العظيم. And remember when we pointed out for Ibrahim the place of the house of Allah, saying, "Don't associate anything with me as my partner and purify my house for those who make the tawaf and those who perform qiyam and those who perform ruku and sujood, and announce among people about Hajj so that they should come to you on foot and on every lean camel from every distance path, so that they witness benefits for them and recite Allah's name in specified days over the provision He gave them from the cattle. So eat thereof and feed the distressed, the poor. Then they must remove their dirt and fulfill their vows and make the tawaf of the ancient house."
If I can call Hasnain to give his first in a series of lectures on Dua Arafat.
Yeah, sure. Just let it rest otherwise. Yeah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum. I've put some of the verses on the screen, but because there's obviously so many verses, they've squished and they're quite small, so you might not be able to see it. I'm sure you get asked this every single week, but we never learn, do we? So I think you all need to come here. Otherwise they can't read. So would you mind standing away? Would you mind standing forward? Oh yeah. This one here. Now, so obviously it's nice to do talks and discussions here because it's quite informal. And the difficulty, or when Muhammad asked me to do a talk like this, I'm going to stand here because all I can see is the mic, is to do a talks and dua is not easy because this is obviously somebody else's words, and it depends on how we look at it. And it's not like tafsir you necessarily can take learnings from it in the way that, oh, he's used this word, not this word, because it's not the word of Allah. So there might not be a specific reason that's been used. It might just be the experience of the Imam at the time, and we don't necessarily know the full context. So obviously, part of what I will share is from what Sheikh Jawad has mentioned and what I've taken from some of the points he's made. But I think the more important thing, and what as I was going through this, was taking away is actually whatever other people might say never beats our own reflections and our own thoughts. And we look at the purpose and what dua of others and our feelings of what dua means for us. And through that, we'll be able to really take into account what the reflections are post that. So I've split I haven't split. I've taken the first, those of you who know the book, I've taken the first 4 sections and called it section 1. So because I think there's 12 sections in the book, so I've taken the first 4, because I did say to Muhammad, I'll do 3 sessions, right? So then 3 times 4. I was asking these guys. You know, I'm a teacher, so I have to say this. So what I'll do is I'll go through a few things, but at the end of each section, I've got a set of questions. So obviously that's what I will share, some of my reflections, but more importantly is to share your reflections. So let's start. The context is obviously Imam Hussein. It's a dua of Imam Hussein on the day of Arafat. I'm not sure entirely of the background. I couldn't find any detailed information about time, space, how many years before Ashura this was revealed. I'm not sure if anyone else knows this. Is anyone aware of how many years, the sort of time period, how old Imam was at the time? I couldn't find, but essentially, obviously, it's Imam's dua. Someone's probably listening, and they are transcribing this dua. So the first section really of Sheikh's, it's all right, don't worry. The first section of Sheikh's book, if you have read it, is Sheikh asks, how do we look at Imam Hussein? And a lot of the times we look at it from the perspective of the tragedy, right? And we know that from all the years we've been listening to Majalis. And he's saying, let's look at it differently and let's look at it from the perspective of victory. Victory how? In the sense that he mentions, just before I move on, how many of you have actually read this part of the book? Thanks for sort of. That's actually good because I thought if everyone's read it, I can't really give you new information. So he's saying that he asked the question, why at the heat of the battle, at the point at which Imam was going out, was he able to just stop when his daughter called, stop and sit down and allow his daughter to sit on his chest? What gave him that contentment, that peace, that calmness to say, actually, this is important? Sheikh Jawad also says, and I'm not sure how reliable this is, but he mentions it, how can people like Habib make jokes on the day of Ashura? Constant jokes with his companions. What gives them that sense that actually this is fine? What gives Bibi Zainab the reason to say this is nothing but beauty? And we've heard reasons behind, but looking at that detail about, for them, this was clearly not a tragedy, but yes, it was. But he mentions that it's more about their victory and what gave them that calmness and that stillness to be able to treat it as a victory. And looking at the dua of Arafat in that light helps us to take in more inspiration from the words of what Imam is saying. But one of the questions to pose, and I posed myself, is this is fine. And I think majority of us here will say, yeah, I agree with that. Let's look at the attitudes and the behaviors of these personalities as opposed to trying to remember them in the sadness. However, we do have many hadith, whether reliable or not, but we are told that there are many hadith where the crying and the sadness and the face and the expression of grief is probably one of the most important things. So how do we balance that sense? It's, and like with any death, we sometimes say we celebrate the life, but we also grieve for the loss. But after many years, have we ever experienced even just one day of Muharram where we actually smile at the end of the lecture because of the attitudes that are being shared? Wow, that's so amazing of Imam. And it brings a smile to our face because we are sort of told that actually we should be sad in the face, even though there might be a comment made which actually brings a smile. So my first question really to pose before we go on is this a correct argument? Is this a correct thought process? And where should we have the? And obviously we can talk about balance, but this Muharram coming up, what should be our more priority or the superior perspective of the Imam, and how can we display that or think about that as we go through the 10 nights that are coming up? So that's my first question to think about. I'm just going to open my laptop and then give you 10 seconds to think about that and then come back to you. So any thoughts? Is it correct, or can we merge the two things together? And if so, how? So Sheikh Jawad is saying that we should see the events of Karbala Ashura as a victory, and we should be really focusing on the amazing characteristics of how the personalities treated that victory, and that should bring a sense of celebration, smile, good feeling to ourselves, wanting to be like that, as opposed to continuously considering the victimization and the tragedy and the sadness for what happened to those people. And we sometimes get caught up with the tragedy over the attitude that we see that. And is that in upcoming Muharram, can we find a balance, or can we actually, is there a way we can go more towards that side? And how do we do that? And is that correct to do? Or is there superiority in that grief at those periods of time? Because we have many hadith about that. Go on. Mike, I'll repeat, yes.
I think on a personal level, it might be possible to change our perspective on how we see the Haram and the tragedy of Karbala. But I think on the community level, it might be a bit, or even a global level, it might be a bit more challenging. In the sense that I feel like since childhood, Muharram's just been about grief, sorrow, and crying. And it has almost become part of the Shia identity.
Yep.
So it's Azadari has become one of the pillars of Shiism. So if you start to bring changes in that, it's like you're rocking the boat really. You bring changes that would shake the foundation of Shiism itself. So, which is not a wrong thing, yeah. I'm just saying that to the community level is very challenging. At the personal level, it might be good, but then maybe few people try to see Karbala in a different way. Yeah.
So let me. Can I ask then? Therefore, if we lose the grief aspect, because it's quite possible we could lose that if we keep intellectualizing and trying to see the other side. Is that okay?
I think it's about balance. I don't think necessarily that you shouldn't grieve because it's part of human that is just added on top to make people cry. And this Muharram, the aim of the Majlis in Muharram is just to make people cry, nothing else.
But we do have lectures who do focus on, the attitudes and the akhlaq and the behaviors.
Yes, we do, but I think that it's so ingrained in us that, the reward you share, you're going to one tear, you're going to get, I don't know, democratic paradigm, all of that. So I feel that it's a whole change of mentality that has to happen.
Yeah, Sheikh Saj.
Just to add something back to the mentioning as well, the hadith, the emphasis on the crying. And to the extent that we have the hadith saying, for example, whoever cries or makes others cry or even feigns crying, then that person generally becomes a complicated. And we have similar hadith.
Yeah.
But just to keep, of course, all the hadith are in context. If you keep the context of that era in mind, those hadith popped up in the early Ibn Abbas period. So 60 months, 70 months, 80 months. At a time where mourning the tragedy of Imam Hussein was frowned upon and punishable by the Abbasids. And so crying or making others cry, or even mourning or keeping a sad face or wearing black clothes as a mark of sadness for what happened, was actually a sign of political protest. So maybe you could mirror that into times Saddam, for example. You could say, the same thing, that's fine. But then to replicate the ramifications of that hadith into all types of places, say, when I'm sitting burning, wherever it is, if I cry one tear, then what doesn't want to say. So the overemphasis of the hadith has to be physical.
Okay, thank you. Difficult to summarize. I'll try to summarize. So the discussion on the floor was, I think there's an agreement that actually it is a good thing to find a balance between the two, but individually we probably could, but communally we've been ingrained in such a process and a way of doing things, it is very difficult to change that. And that's because of some of the hadith and the narrations we have. However, on the same point that the hadith and the narrations we have come in a context where potentially they might have come as a protest to the time, for example, the Abbasid time or Saddam time, when we had to show something different, protest against the oppression that was happening. And so the hadith might not have been directly related to all times, but to that specific time. So absolutely, we probably need to find some balance between it. So if we look at this, the next slide is looking at dua of the Ayman. If we look at a dua, there are a number of ways we can look at it, and we could even look at it more than this, but these are the three that I've sort of picked up. So one is around an insight into the realities of the world. So if Imam Ali or the Prophet Rasulullah or any Imam was reciting, and we have this dua which we understand is authentic, we could look at that dua as a way of understanding the realities. The second one is appreciation for that individual, which is sort of partly of what we'll do today. And then ideas on how to shape our own personal dua. But interestingly, when thinking about this, I couldn't put on there actually a dua for us. But how often do we just recite the dua thinking it's actually our dua? And really the last one, you could say, well, it's an idea, it's my dua using those words. Actually, it never is my dua. Because half the time, either I don't understand the Arabic, or the English translation, as I found out here, and people will know more than I do, is clearly not exactly very close to even not even close to what the translation should be. It's quite a way off. And so it confuses me as a reader to say that. So it's, interestingly, those three, the first two, I think, for me, as a reflection on doing this, is the insight into how they saw the universe is one of the real interesting things for me to go into. And we'll see it in a moment. And then obviously the appreciation of the individual. And so these sessions hopefully should look at the first two and go into detail about how we can appreciate and understand the universe from the dua. So let's go into it. Section 1. So the first section, only one of you has the book. The first section is here. So I'm going to leave this up for a few seconds just for you to read the English. And as I said, some of the English translation might be poor, but we can correct it. So, praise be to Allah, whose determination cannot be repelled by anything, whose gifts cannot be stopped by anything, whose making cannot be resembled by making of anyone. He is all magnanimous, the all liberal. He originated the genus of the wonderful things, and he perfected the made things by his wisdom. All growing things cannot be hidden from him, and all things deposited with him shall never be wasted. He is the repayer of every deed, the enricher of every satisfied one, the merciful towards every supplicant, and the revealer of the benefits. And the all-comprehensive book with the glaring light, he is also the hearer of prayers, the warder of anguishes, the raiser of ranks, and the suppressor of tyrants. There is no God other than him, and there is nothing equivalent to him, and nothing like the likeness of him. And he is the all-hearing, the all-seeing, the all-gentle, the all-aware, and he has power over all things. So that's the first section. I just want to come on to and probably ask Sheikh Tajri about this first verse here, because Sheikh Jawad mentions that this is around, he feels that the translation is not very good. I don't know if you have anything to say. So, not this one, sorry, yeah, I'm going to go back. Jazi kulli sani'. How would you take that? If that's all right to ask you on the spot.
Bidaya is the way. Sani is someone who does something, who produces something, a producer or maker of the deed, rather than the deed itself. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what
So his perspective is that God is giving power to the creation through this verse.
because the word Sani is an active participle. So the recompense of the day of every doer or maker or something, fashioner or something, rather than the people or every deed. Sani is not a deed, it's the doer. They give agency really to
So his perspective, therefore, is that in here, Allah is actually saying that He's giving His power to the creation, to the people, to the universe, and He's giving us a gift of that power. And this is a theme which runs through the next few verses. So my questions here is, why do we see this as a common starting point to du'as? And why? And what does it allow us to feel? And to me, it's pretty straightforward. But I'll put it back onto you guys, and there might be much more detail and depth answers than I can come up with. But what does this type of starting to dua help us to achieve? So if you remember the detail of the lines above, it was all about God, wasn't it? Anyone? So from my perspective, it's very much around recognizing the majesty of God, recognizing this awesomeness, this power, starting off by saying, actually, there isn't, before I say anything, and we've heard this, I know I was teaching in madrasa a few weeks back about dua and trying to, what do you start with? What's the recipe for dua? What's the ingredients? And you always start off with sort of praising God or trying to understand God. So here it is. And there's a few hadith, which I won't go through, but I can share around Imam Ja'far Sadiq talking about how the starting point of any conversation with Allah must be around recognizing His majesty. And that's what Imam was doing straight away. So if I go on, the next part is the story about us. So before he starts that, he says these words. And to me, this is probably the most powerful thing to take away from today. This is what I took from this part, or these whole 4 sections. These 4 lines to me just encompass so much. And recognize the contents. It's come just after talking about the majesty and the grandeur and all the attributes about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, oh Allah, I want you. I testify to the lordship of you. So the nurturing, the lordship, the carer of the whole universe. And then I confess that you are my nurturer, my carer, and that I want to return back to you. That is encompassed, to me at least, the whole purpose of our life, right? There is a desire to approach back to you because you cared for me. Therefore, I want to get back to you. So, I'm pausing there just to allow you to just have that reflection time. Remember lordship, Rabb, there's Rabb, Rububiyyah, and Rabb, and all of the definitions of Rabb we've heard before. And interesting, the second verse is about general, whereas the third verse is about me and my Lord. And this is also represented to ourselves as well. My Lord is probably different to your Lord in the way that I perceive. Okay, so and what you probably notice is that all I'm doing here is just sharing the verses so that we can all have a reflection. I've got not much to say apart from our own reflection and Imam Hussein's reflection through the words. So if we've established one, the majesty of God, so we've kept ourselves or reminded ourselves of being humble in front of that greatness. Then we've said we've got a desire to return to you because you have nurtured us and cared for us. How is that nurturing? Remind myself, what nurturing did Allah do for us? What nurturing did Allah do for the universe, one? And then what nurturing did Allah do for me that I then desire to go back to Him? So the next few verses, captured a few more, and this is section 2, is around that reflection about all the blessings and the care that Allah has given Imam Hussein. And if we take Imam Hussein as a reflection of the realities of the universe, therefore these are care for myself and yourself as well. So you had begun bestowing on me before I was anything worth mentioning. And you created me from dust, and then you put me in loins, saved me from the vicissitude of time and the change of the ages and the years. I was moving from loin to womb throughout the passages of the past days and the ancient ages. To me, this is, why would anyone talk about what happened before? If I were to do a dua, I can understand the first section, I can understand that desire to return to you, but then I'd probably say, and you looked after me when I was a child. You looked after me when I was born. You looked after me when I was in school, when I was growing up. But he's going right back. He's saying that actually there's something more special about me and you and him that means that Allah nurtured beforehand. There was this care of that thought that, Salma or John or is there in the mind of God prior to anything. And that care continued throughout those generations. So I'm humble, but I'm also quite special. I've got Imam Hussein is saying, he's got his own mission in this world, because if he didn't, there wouldn't necessarily be a need to worry about him in advance and plan that journey from loin to womb till today. And then it says, you took me out on account of the guidance that you already known about me, so you've already given me guidance, and you have made easy the way, and you have brought me up. Even before that, you had compassion to me through your excellent confer and affluent bestowals. And then there's a whole section on, you looked after me when I was young. You put love in my mother. You put love in the breastfeeder. You looked after me when I was small. You allowed sustenance to come to me. There's a whole set of verses around everything from the time of birth to where he is now, about that nurturing, that caring, that looking after. But I haven't put that on here because really I want to focus on, why is it important to talk about before? So the question Sheikh Jawad asks and then explains is, why does Imam put an emphasis onto how he was special since the beginning of time and how God looked after him and only brought him out into the world when the time was right? And it says there in the verses, and you guided me and you brought me out when you had planned. Is this a bit of arrogance? Did Imam Hussein know that he was going to do everything he was going to do and therefore he's only talking about himself? because Allah looked after him, because he had that mission. Now, maybe not. What makes him special? Or is this the reality of every one of us? Do each one of us have this special nature that our journey right from non-existent to when we die and going forward is planned? There's a diary, there's something there which explains our journey. And that makes us quite special, even though we've just reflected that we are nothing in front of God. So there's a very nice balance, or at least I'm reflecting on, there's a very interesting balance that on one hand, I reflect on the majesty of God, I'm humble, I've got humility, but on the other hand, I've got my own special purpose and mission throughout life. Because otherwise, why would God have cared for us? And why would Imam be talking about God caring for us right back from before we even understood existence? And then what does this mean for the evil people? If there's so much love and Sheikh Jawad Jamali always talks about the love of God. If there's so much love before, what is it when he knows that there is an evil person? And Sheikh uses the word or the verse in the Quran that even when Prophet Musa and Harun were asking God, and he said, go and speak kindly to Fir'aun, maybe because he will have khashya, this awe of me. So even Fir'aun, there was this perspective that he will also come to a realization that actually God is, and there's something more than his reality. So these are the questions that I've put up for us to reflect on. And yeah, we don't need to cover it. We don't need to reflect unless anyone has anything to say on them. Okay, section 3 out of 4, the ways in which we were guided. So, when I commenced my life by pronouncing, so we've understood God's majesty, we've humbled ourselves, we've recognized how the rub and the nurturing of God started well before and has come through the generations to where we are now. We've got a special purpose in life, in existence. Each one of us is special in the story of humanity. But how do we know God? We have to recognize that there is guidance there as well. So, when I commenced my life, you perfected for me the affluent bestowals and brought me up with an increase every year when my creation was accomplished. And my power became straight. You put me under the obligation of your claim, which is that you inspired me with the recognition of you and alarmed me by the wonders of your wisdom and aroused in me that which you created in your heavens and lands, which is excellent creation of you, and attracted my attention to thank and mention you. And you made obligatory on me obey and worship you, and you made me understand with which your apostles came. You made easy for me to find agreeable your pleasure you bestowed upon me with the favors out of your aid and your gentleness. So, summary. Sheikh Jawad says, from that, he reflects there are 5 ways that Allah guided us. My questions is there something special about the order of those guidance? Because that's how it's listed in the dua. Number 1, direct knowledge to our hearts. If you remember, there was that. Number 2, life events and experiences. 3, these moments of wow, aha. 4, directing our intention or inspiring us. And then the 5th one was understanding the teachings of the apostles of the Prophet. Interesting, it says understanding, faham. That's understanding, a detail. What does the order tell us? And why is the teachings of the Prophet the last one on the list? So there are 4 above that Imam explains and suggests to me that there's so much more to the understanding of God before we even get to this formal religion that we have been given. And these are quite powerful statements, particularly when we think about what came before, which is humbleness to God, a special nature and nurture, and then guidance without the need of prophets until the end. It was always there as part of that journey and the way that universe has been set up and created. Any thoughts on that?
as well. And that everybody can react to that. So I think that God helps us in so many ways from within. So I think we just need to be more aware of it. We tend to focus too much on the external things like the prophet and the imam, which are there in their own place, but I think that there's a lot more from within that we have to tap into.
Yeah, and reflecting on this is Imam Hussein, only 30 years after, I don't know when he was, after the Prophet announced, and yet he's only mentioning the teachings of the Prophet at the end. So close to that teaching being revealed, yet it only came at the end.
The last one, the teaching of the Prophet, is formalized reason, very accessible to those who know that the Prophet, or even
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Muhammad, yeah.
I was going to say similar results to this religion is a reminder of what is already inherently within us. Hence, one of the names of the Quran in particular is called reminders. So,
Yeah. And part of it is also when we go through those things, in each of those there is that. So again, my reflection is in each of those there's that the side where God has given that opportunities, but in each of the four there is a requirement for me also to do something about it. So I can have that inner guidance put into me, but if I don't recognize it, if I see those wow moments, but if I don't attribute it to something, so there's a two-way process here, and then that's where we actually get that recognition from.
This is also tied to the fact that the religion cannot be forced on somebody. So you need to get a point where you can take those teachings. So that's the difference.
Yeah, absolutely, and probably the teachings of the Prophet may become last, because until you actually recognize the first four, yeah, that's a good point. Okay, and then I've got a few minutes left. So, and then the final section is then how God sees us. We've talked about these. How God sees us. So we've understood, we've tried to reflect on how we see God, majestic. We've tried to understand how God has created the universe and the perspective and the approach of life. Then we've looked at how he's guided that creation. And now we think, well, how does he see that? How does he see that creation? And sometimes you have to put yourself in the other shoes. You have to think about who God is to understand how he sees it. So let's read a few of these lines and then we'll end. So, my ignorance of you. So this is not in order. Yeah, there's a big chunk missing, or I haven't put it on, and then we move to the next section. So my ignorance of you and challenge of you has not stopped you from showing me that which takes me nearer to you, and from leading me to that which grants me proximity to you. So if I pray to you, you will respond to me. Oops. And if I beg you, you will give me. And if I obey you, you will thank me. And if I thank you, you will give me more. All of that is the completion of your favors on me and your kindness towards me. So all glory be to you, all glory be to you. You are verily the originator and the reproducer, and worthy of all praise and full of glory. So the last section is really around recognizing now that we've had the guidance, we've been given all this opportunity, yet, Imam is saying, I can still be audacious to you. I can still question you. I can still say things about you. I can still say that, look at Dua Kumail. You're not the Lord who would put someone in the fire, yet they would call out your name. Hey, heart, that's not who you are. That's quite an audacious thing to say to God. That's not who you are. And if you did, I wouldn't, and he says this, if you did, I wouldn't really believe in you, right? That's not the type of God I want to believe in. So these words emphasize a sense of overly loving God, and the book gives lots of examples. So an example Sheikh Jawad says is that if you have two mothers and they have two sons, and this one son accidentally kills the other, maybe pushes him, or something happens, and the one mother would want a justice for her son, so that she would want the other son to be either put to prison or whatever the death penalty is. But the mother of that son who did the deed, however much she doesn't approve of the deed, would she ever say, yeah, okay, actually he did the deed, so send him to the capital, the corporal punishment, allow him to be on death row, whatever that might be, long prison? It just wouldn't happen. And this is sort of what Imam is reflecting on here, isn't it? That regardless of what I do and what I say, I know that you'll always be kind to me because you've been kind to me since day one. And so all of this is essentially, and that's why in my view anyway, and reflecting on that, that's why the title is the humility. All of this is sort of reflecting, I'm not sure what happened there, reflecting on that humility yet powerfulness of Imam Hussein. When I say powerfulness, I don't know the other word to use. That strength, that yes, I might be worthless, but yet I have a mission on this existence to get back to Allah. And I know that all of this guidance is there. And I know all of this mercy and love is there. So what is there for me to feel concerned or worried about? So therefore, on the battlefield, when my daughter comes along and says, Dad, can you talk to me a bit? Yeah, I don't care what's happening there. I can just stop and I can have a conversation. And on the battlefield, I can have a bit of a joke with my mate. Because this whole thing we know, in those words of Imam Hussein, that there is one, it doesn't matter because there is one being who knows is watching me. I don't need to be worried. And all of these summarizes why he might feel that way, and that witnessing of his feeling and his expression to God, because he's so confident that God has his back, essentially, right? And that's my reflection of these first four statements. So in summary, we are witnessing Imam's understanding of God in the world. He describes God to remind himself of his loneliness, yet he reminds himself about how special he actually is, so special that God thought of him and cared for him and nurtured him even from the beginning. He has a special place in this universe, and I think, a lot of people reflect, so do we. He reminds himself of how God has not only cared, but then guided him towards knowing and to return back. And he expresses how loving God is, that not only has God cared for him, nurtured him, guided him, even after being ignorant and audacious to God, he'll still provide and guide and love him ongoing forward from that. So our reflection to close is, we just cannot fathom how insignificant we are in front of God, yet we just cannot fathom how important our mission and critical our purpose is in existence. Maybe to humanity at large, or existence at large, but critical to our soul itself. There is a purpose to life. It's not just go through it. And that's it. I shouldn't go on next page. And that's it. Any final thoughts from? No, that's fine. Go.
The last section we were talking about how God sees us and how He cares for us. And I feel that as human beings, that's something that we're not necessarily aware of to the full extent. And I think that this lack of understanding God's love for us affects many things in the sense, by not even the way of practice religion. We end up putting so much focus on faith, for example, where God doesn't talk about justice and punishment or anything like that. It's just about help.
That's not how Imam Hussein sees it. Yeah, absolutely.
And also the other thing is, when we don't have that loving connection, when we don't, it's more about God just being the master and just us being the servant. Yes. Sometimes we find it hard to directly connect to Him, or we feel that we have to go through a third person, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
To get to Him. Whereas really, He's just there because He's the onset Himself. He doesn't go through the trumpet and just connected directly to God, and He knows that God's going to expect Him with His, weakness and just the way He is.
Yeah.
And I think that if we could internalize that feeling, that would really help us in the journey.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a good point. And just to reflect on those first four sections, I haven't gone through the rest, but I assume it's similar. Is that all of this is just reminding himself of exactly that. So continuously reminding ourselves that actually this is what God is. This is not what God is part of the dua itself. It's not necessarily asking for something from God. It's actually reminding ourselves so that we are more closer to God in that understanding of God. And that, in this section, these 4 sections, and perhaps probably the rest of it as well, it's exactly the same. And so it gives little bit of a different taste to what dua actually is, because we take dua as, we just want something, but actually dua could just be a reflection, a reminder to ourselves about the realities. And that itself is a development of our soul. And we've achieved something. God's actually given it. And the other thing, just to add while you're saying, is that sometimes we are told, be thankful for the hands we're given, or the ability to breathe, or the ability to taste. Sometimes, and this is just me, and maybe if I said this elsewhere, I'd get told off, but sometimes I say, well, why should I say thank you for the ability to breathe? Because some people, okay, breathing is probably ability to see. Some people can't see, so they should thank for the ability of not seeing, so that they can give. To me, sometimes it feels, or if it's like to give us lungs in the way that we breathe. If we didn't have lungs, we wouldn't be able to breathe this air. But then we would adapt in a different way. Existence would be probably different. Humans might not have the need to breathe. To me, sometimes it's a bit shallow. But if you say, I thank for that continuous caring through that, I have regardless of how I am, I have a purpose, I have a significance, and there has always been something special about me that you have stayed with me throughout existence. To me, that's a different type of thanks. That if it wasn't for you, that there wouldn't be this knowledge and this existence actually being there. But I suppose there's benefits of both ways of looking at it. Okay. Just before we end, I brought a dua on the screen. It was just something I found, and I was just wondering if you are able to recognize where it's from. I know it's small writing, but just summarize. Just have a quick summary. Who wrote it, or who recited it? What do you think? From the Bible? Fourth Imam? So the reason I put this is that I suppose we should take dua, and dua is important, and the way we recite dua and we take duas from our Aimma is important to reflect on. But if we really want to have dua, we should recite it out. We should make it up ourselves. Chat GPT. So the point is, anyone can computer can write a dua, which actually is pretty good. I mean, you could probably tell it's not quite the wording of dua Arafat, but the point, if I'd spent more time and suggested more options to it, I just literally said, write a dua. I said write a prayer, and it made it quite biblical. Then I really said no, but write a dua, and it used a lot of the Arabic words. And I write a dua where it praises God, thanks God, asks for forgiveness, and ends with thank you God. And that was it. And this is what I came up with. So anyone can write a dua. And actually, I could probably take this, and probably some people might do tafsir on it. It's true, isn't it? But I suppose the takeaway message is, let's be honest in which du'as we're doing tafsir and actually reflecting on. And actually, let's do our own du'as as well. Okay, thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Please recite Surah Fatih.
Thank you so much, Hasnain.
I thought it was really insightful, and I'm really looking forward to the next one. Just to let you know that there won't be any program next Thursday. We will, inshallah, resume on the 6th of July. And we can't carry on these programs without your generous donations. So if you could kindly donate towards Time for Change, you can do so by cash in the donation box by the refreshments, by card or PayPal. You can also sponsor a program for your marhumin at a cost of £10 per name. Refreshments will be served in the dining room at the end of the corridor. And if I can please ask you all to recite the Surah Fatiha for Marhum Murtaza Mekji and all Marhumin Al-Fatiha.